RaMell, how are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How are you?
Doing well. So to start, I've been wanting to ask this since I saw this movie. The use of the footage of the moon landing in this movie is
Yeah.
so fascinating to me because obviously in 2024, we're well aware that the reason the moon landing happened is because of the mathematical equations of Black women. But using
Mm,
it in a movie like this, where it is another hidden story at the same time, is
mm.
just so fascinating to me. And so I wanted to know your thought process when you were using that footage in a movie like this and how it kind of came to be.
Yeah, I love that deep cut of this the source of us getting us there. And yeah, the equations from I don't remember her name, but I know the story quite well. I It's interesting to me the contrast, right, between technological advancement and social and ideological advancement. And I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a young boy during the times in which we're doing things that people have said were impossible and are generally unimaginable, and kind of define religion essentially by leaving Earth and going to the cosmos, but then also to have the social world be so restricting. I can't imagine what that does to the psychology of a young boy. So we wanted to, yeah, bring that to the visceral space of cinema.
Well, yeah, and I'm stealing this from a letterbox review I saw, so it is not my original thought, but it is so true. Is we've kind of lost the idea of what POV means, and so the letterbox review said for all those people on TikTok who thinks they know what POV means, just watch Nickel Boys.
Yeah.
And it is very interesting because I'm like, yeah, this is like if you want to know what a POV movie is, it's Nickel Boy. But while you were writing this versus filming something like this, where it is switching perspectives and it sometimes does it so seamlessly that it takes like the audience a second to catch up on whose POV we're kind of in.
Yeah.
What for you was the biggest challenge going from like the idea period of a movie like this to the like filming and the production side of things?
Yeah, that's a really specific and good question, Rachel. I appreciate it because a lot of people just ask about POV, which is a large concept, but it's the touch of its execution that that shows whether it lives or dies, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part was trying to decide what points of vision and what points of like head movement to really be faithful to and which ones to shed. I think other films that have tried to do POV traditionally use like a wide angle lens, and they're kind of more interested in the field of view than they are what it means to actually be looking from the human eyes, which is more concerned with attention and a type of like bizarre clarity, which as opposed to as much as you can see. And so I think aside from those actual literal decisions, like, okay, it has to be shot with long lenses and has to be shallow depth of field so you can control the focus. It's about like how fast to move the camera over, when you're looking at something or when someone is making you uncomfortable or you want to avert someone's eyes. How do you do that with the camera? Do you just rack focus out? Or do you like duck sideways? Do you duck down? Like how faithful are we to be? And so Jomo Frey and I, the amazing cinematographer on the film, spent many weeks with my DSLR trying to touch on these really subtle things that even changed on the day when we were shooting.
Man, it makes it so special. And I think one of the things that I don't want to spoil this because it's like for me, it is I was well aware of what was going on the minute I saw him because I know Daveed Diggs. But the use of
Mm,
Daveed Diggs in this movie is so interesting because it's like if you know Daveed Diggs, you like I was instantly aware something was going on because I was like, wait, hold on, Daveed. And it was like it like clued me into something else. But like, was his casting intentional in that way, or is it meant to just be like, no, like Daveed's a great actor, like he both alive this situation.
yeah, yeah.
But for me, I'm like, well, hold on, what do you mean, Daveed?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because we're like, we want to do David Diggs, but obviously he's light skinned and people are going to know that it's Turner because it's David and he looks not like Elwood. But then most films, when you're doing casting, there's like so much slip between the past and the future that we're like, well, I think half the people would just be like, oh, it's just bad casting. We're telling people it's Elwood, so you got to believe that it's Elwood. And but because David has a theater background and is so good with his body, we couldn't help but ask him if he wanted to do it because you know, if you're not seeing your face, everything else matters even more, you know, and you don't have a place to comfortably settle onto. And so he was an easy choice, but it was hard for those conceptual reasons, you know.
Well, yeah, because I was like the younger Elwood casting. I was like, that's perfect. There's no way that this like, and I was like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was way too like, no, there's no way
yeah.
they did bad casting with this.
But
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 it is,
we leaned in,
yeah.
Rachel, to the idea that the audience wants to believe.
Mm,
So if we tell them it's Elwood, they'll believe it's Elwood, you know? And it
yeah.
works for some, maybe not for all, because some are maybe savvier or more skeptical than others, but
Well, and it's just this movie is so I almost want to call it lyrical just in the way that it is like shot and how you guys kind of like move from like scene to scene with these characters. But it is so interesting to look at it from like a filmmaking perspective because it does feel like you're playing a song with each of these characters throughout the entire film. Was
love that.
there was there something that helped you though, like when you were transitioning again from writing to directing and like making sure that you know, sections with Turner felt a certain way versus what was happening with Elwood at the same time.
You know, I always had the Tazata montage in mind. That was something that was, I had made a proof of concept of it during the
Mm-hmm.
writing process. That's about, you know, 70% true to what it already is. We had a lot of those images already. I think the idea was to, if we could just get to the montage, it would be emotionally impactful. And I think there's something, I don't know, I think the way that I film and the way that I frame is I don't want to like it feels poetic already or it feels like something. It's kind of it's quite I don't know. It's very intuitive, but also Jocelyn and Barnes and I wrote, you know, 95% of the images you see were, you know, preconceived and written down with camera movement. And so it's organized around the way that they see. So we ask ourselves in this moment, in this room, what is Turner looking at? What is Elwood looking at? Elwood's probably looking at the sky. He's looking at, you know, the natural world. And Turner's probably more interested in the utilitarian elements of the space. Like, how can he get through this moment to get to the next? And those types of decisions being done beforehand gave Joe Mofre and I a lot of freedom because we knew what we wanted to look at already, you know?
Yeah. And for my last question, I want to ask, like, you obviously it's rooted in Anjanu's like this grandmother who kind of like ends up connecting these two boys in, in her own strange way. But it's really fascinating to see her kind of represent the time period in which all this is happening versus like we talked about David being the 80s and like what happens as this character gets older. When you have these two characters that, you know, are in their own way kind of framing the story, like as we are learning about the story, they're framing it in their own interesting way. Which time period did you kind of find more fun to explore with those two characters? Because she is so 60s and then he is so much in the 80s at the same time.
Um, Rachel, you're a really smart questioner,
Thank you.
and movie watcher, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, very insightful observations you have. I think David's time period and his time jumps, I think were kind of the most interesting because we were, especially from a production design standpoint, we're showing New York and we're not in New York, we're in Louisiana. And so Nora Mendez is sort of tasked with building or finding spaces and building an environment that resembles 70s New York, 80s New York, 90s New York, without overdoing it, without having a Yankees flag on the wall, you know, which would be like, okay, I guess we're in New York, guys, you know. It's quite difficult. I think that was probably the most fun. I mean, I don't want to say the most fun because it was all enjoyable, but the most challenging and the most clear way to be obvious about the way in which we wanted to deal with history, which was make history feel like it's the present while also making it feel like it's history at the same time. Um, yeah, I kind of don't know how to answer your question because it's too good.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But I as I leave, I will say you guys did a great job of a New York bar. I was like, yep, this is the
Yeah.
bar in New York City. I was like, this is exactly the kind of bars that we have. But thank you so much. I
Cool.
think this movie is beautiful and I really loved it. And so thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Have a great one.